Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. I'm not here with Geeky Sparkles in this video, but I'm going to talk about Embracer Group and Dark Horse Comics, and it's a dark day for Dark Horse Comics. Embracer Group, which is this Swedish, I believe they're Swedish, mega conglomerate that bought up all these gaming studios a couple of years ago. They went on a spending spree. They bought Lord of the Rings and a whole bunch of other companies. They've had to write down Dark Horse Comics. They spent a bunch of money to buy Dark Horse Comics, I think probably with the intention of making video games based on Hellboy. I'm trying to think what all they have that's actually worth it, because a lot of their stuff is creator-owned. But yeah, they were going to make video games of these characters, I think, and movie deals and all this stuff, and they overspent. Now they have to write it down. So write down, for those of you who don't know, we'll talk more about it, is basically they overpaid. They overpaid for Dark Horse Comics, and they are on fire. This company is shutting down all kinds of studios, but some of its acquisitions that they're not selling or shutting down are not worth as much as they paid. This was like, they made some of the worst media deals in history, and everybody was talking about Embracer and how amazing it was that Embracer was coming in and buying everything. And Embracer thought they were going to get, I believe, a $2 billion game deal or movie deal or something, and that fell through. So they went and they bought all this stuff. They bought up all these gaming studios, and thinking that they were going to get this $2 billion deal, it fell through, and now they're left holding the bag. They've actually had to split the company up into three parts to survive. They're pimping out the Lord of the Rings. They're shutting down AAA studios. And I think you can kind of trace back the start of the demise of AAA gaming to Embracer Group buying all these studios. But yeah, comics are getting thrown into the mix here. Dark Horse Comics, one of the biggest indie, I don't know if you really consider them indie, but one of the biggest publishers out there, right? They're in the top 3, 4, 5. I don't know. I think top 5, along with, IDW, which is on life support at this point, and Marvel, DC, and Image. And I don't know if this is going to impact the company at all. I have no idea, but I know that they spent a lot of money on Dark Horse, and Mike Richardson, who I think is in his 70s, cashed that fat check, right? I probably would have done the same thing, because I don't know if they have a lot of original IP. I think it's mostly creator-owned stuff. So let's talk about this. This news just dropped today. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. No woohoos. It wouldn't be appropriate. It's a very dark day for Dark Horse. Kind of. I don't know if it's going to affect their business operations at all, but it just shows that this stuff is not worth, comics publishers not worth anything. So this is coming from ICV2. Embracer writes down Asmodee and Dark Horse. So two of their money-losing operations, and shows a big loss for quarter and fiscal year. So Embracer Group wrote down its value for Asmodee and Dark Horse, part of a big loss reported for the quarter and fiscal year ending in March 2024. In its fiscal Q4, that'd be January through March, Embracer lost $1.7 billion compared to the $71.6 million profit a year ago. Damn! The company's loss for the full year ended in March 2024. It was around $1.7 billion compared to a $415 million profit. Somebody's juggling the books. That doesn't make any sense, because I know they're not in very good shape right now. The biggest loss came from asset write-downs, both from companies that sold and companies that remain on the Embracer balance sheet. When companies are acquired, the difference between the value of the hard assets the acquired company owns and the price paid for the company goes on the acquirer's, Embracer's balance sheet as a goodwill asset. In the case of Asmodee, goodwill was written down by $630 million, 20% of the roughly $3.1 billion they paid for it. Why would they pay so much for them? It doesn't make any sense. The goodwill of Dark Horse was written down by around $63 million. The acquisition price for Dark Horse has not been disclosed. I don't even think it's $1 billion. It's a comic book publisher. If I had to guess Dark Horse, I would say maybe a couple $100 million, maybe. But again, I'm trying to think, like, what do they have? What IP do they have? Do they own? Mostly they publish manga, they publish creator-owned stuff. For both companies, the reasons cited for the write-downs were macroeconomic headwinds and rising interest rates, combined with prudent future expectations. Translation, they do not expect Dark Horse Comics to make back the amount of money that they spent on it. Now, it's not just Dark Horse. It's other stuff they bought too, but they do not expect them to make bank. The net impact on Embracer's balance sheet of the write-downs was less than the goodwill impairment due to reevaluations of earnouts related to the acquisitions. This is boring accounting stuff, I know. But people wonder what write-downs are. And it's basically, yes, you overpaid for an asset. And sometimes, when you buy something, you can put it on the books, break it up into multiple years, and that's how you kind of offset the tax liability and yada, yada. In this case, they way overpaid for Dark Horse Comics. They're looking at the future of Dark Horse Comics. They're not seeing a future, probably because of the state of the comic book industry, the North American direct market. And they're looking at that and they're like, damn, we are not, all these comic shops are closing. There's no way we're going to get our money back on this thing. And again, they spent stupidly a couple of years ago thinking that they were going to get this $2 billion deal. And it turns out that they lost almost $2 billion. Embracer also lost around $800 million from its sale of video game studios Saber Interactive and Gearbox. There was also a presumably much smaller loss related to the sale of Miniature Market, which was referred to as a minor direct-to-consumer business. The company had expenses related to other aspects of its restructuring, including layoffs. Yeah, they laid a bunch of people off. They shut a bunch of things down. It's worth noting that all the write-down and asset sale losses listed above do not affect cash, but do affect the book value of the company. It's possible that they're getting ready to sell or offload Dark Horse, maybe, and they have to come up with a blue book price for it. Like, okay, we might have paid $500 million for Dark Horse, but we're looking at it and it's only worth like $50 to $100 million at the most. Because remember, a lot of these websites and these media companies that got bought up in the last couple of years, they were going for insane prices. There were websites, okay, just case in point. And I was reminded of this when I was looking at IGN acquiring some of Reed Pop's video game websites. CBS had a bunch of video game websites, and they paid, I'm not kidding, they paid $500 million for a whole bunch of these video game websites, and then they sold them to another buyer for 1/10 of that, for $50 million, all the websites. I mean, talk about a bad deal. It was like a fire sale. And I have to wonder, is a fire sale coming for Dark Horse? Will they be like, yeah, we don't really have any IP. They just publish other people's stuff. Are we going to get out of this deal? Are we going to sell it off? Maybe they'll sell it to like Netflix or something. If Netflix wants to publish comic books, I don't know. That'd be interesting. But yeah, I think they're devaluing Dark Horse Comics because they're looking to either, take the L on their taxes, or they're going to sell it to somebody else. Embracer Group sales were down 5% for the quarter, but up 12% for the year. Asmodee sales were up 1% in January. They said that the sales contribution of Star Wars Unlimited in the January-March quarter offsets the trading card sales in Europe, blah, blah, blah. Dark Horse's sales are not broken out, but anecdotally, the company noted especially good results from Berserk and Avatar of the Last Airbender. So they publish a lot of licensed stuff, though, right? They publish a lot of creator-owned content, a lot of manga. They don't own a whole lot. It's not like Dark Horse, to the best of my knowledge, does not have their own like Dark Horse CU or whatever. They're just kind of waiting in the wings because even Hellboy is creator-owned. I don't know if they own part of these deals. Like, okay, so this is actually a true story, and I'm gonna bring this up because it is related. We're offering Shadowbinders again, Volume 3 and Volume 1 and 2. You can go out to Indiegogo. People have asked for an Indiegogo campaign because they don't back through websites or they don't like Kickstarter or whatever the deal is. But so we're on Indiegogo now. At one point, we were talking to Dark Horse about rebooting Shadowbinders with them. At one point, and if I remember the deal correctly, and it has been a while. And this was like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. If I remember the deal correctly, like they would give us an advance, but they also held on to a percentage of like the media rights or something. So it would have been like, yeah, we'll give you a page, or we'll give you an advance, a against, sales, and then we hold on to the media rights, or I forget what it was. I forget the percentages off the top of my head, but ultimately we did not do it because the editor that was there went someplace else, and I think it probably was a good thing that we didn't, because we would have again been giving up or tying up our media rights with Dark Horse. But this was a while ago. But yeah, we were going to actually reboot Shadowbinders. We actually talked to some people over there that were interested, and then it just didn't happen. And again, probably a good thing that it didn't. But yeah, I wonder how many other people are kind of tied into that situation, right? So yeah, Embracer announced that it plans to break up into 3 companies in the coming months, with Asmodee as a separate publicly traded company and Dark Horse in one of the 2 other publicly traded companies. Probably, if I had to guess, Middle Earth and Friends. So they were gonna split it into Asmodee, and they lost value, Coffee Stain and Friends, which is like indie games, and then Middle Earth Enterprises and Friends. That would be Lord of the Rings, Tomb Raider, and probably whatever IP Dark Horse has, if I had to guess. So I think they're just restructuring the company, but that's not good. That's not really a vote of confidence. Be like, yeah, we're gonna write down, of all the companies they own, we're gonna write down the value of Dark Horse Comics based on future projections, right? So let's kind of look at. Yeah, this was the deal, by the way. It was 2022. So in 2 years' time, they've decided that Dark Horse isn't worth what they paid for it. We'll talk about this briefly. This is a story from Bleeding Fool. Random thoughts on the state of the comic hobby, lies and distortions in the business of comic books. Nobody knows what comic books are actually selling right now. It's kind of frustrating. Nobody really knows. I just know that anecdotally, does not seem like kids are into them now. Anecdotally, you do not see them being sold outside of comic shops if you can find a comic shop. So anecdotally, comic shops are closing at a shocking rate. We have people that have been in the business for decades going out of business. So I can't think the sales numbers are that fantastic. Now, I do see a lot of trade paperbacks at places like Ollie's. I do know that graphic novels are selling well. I think Marvel and DC have overstated or overinflated their trade paperback numbers, because we have piles and piles of 2015 to 2018 era Marvel and DC comics rotting at Ollie's. And I have to wonder, did they fudge the numbers to buy themselves more time? Because now that they're kind of looking into things, and as I understand it, they're looking for somebody now. And I have to give a hat tip to Aaron Sparrow, who sent me a tweet that Marvel's actually looking for somebody now to look at the numbers, the publishing numbers, that's going to be their job, because I think that they've been fudging their numbers to try to survive. Because Disney is going to look at this and they're cutting everything, and they're going to be like, yeah, comic books don't sell that well in the grand scheme of things. Like, why do we have a whole nother publishing company when we can just outsource all this stuff? So I think that the day is going to come when Marvel and or DC will just outsource everything, right? But if Marvel and DC go by the wayside, then everybody else does too, because they're all kind of dependent on Marvel and DC, right? But Dark Horse is a big player, but I think that they're a big player because of their licensed content, and anybody could do that. That being said, I don't know what the comics are selling. I have no idea. There's no way to know. Even looking at Comic-Con, the number of new comic book releases, the numbers are all over the damn place. DC's down to 600 in 2023. Dark Horse went from 378 new releases to 220. Nobody knows what's selling. One thing they do know, though, is that I guess Marvel and DC combined, again, if I remember correctly from ICV2, combined, they are selling less than 10% of what Scholastic and stuff are selling. That's insane. But they keep rolling. Wow. They keep rolling all of these figures into the total comic market. So they're going to count crowdfunding. They're going to count Dogman. They're going to count children's books that just happen to have word balloons. They're going to count manga. And that's not giving you an idea of the health of the North American comic book market. But this tells me that they don't think there's going to be a future long term. So I don't know. But again, most of what Dark Horse publishes, anybody can publish it. So if Dark Horse went out tomorrow, I mean, the thing I was mostly interested in with Dark Horse for the longest time was their Star Wars material. And then once Disney bought Lucasfilm, that ended. That whole universe ended. And, here we are now with the Marvel and IDW crap, right? But there we go, guys. I'm going to wrap it up. Please subscribe. We'll talk later.